Hello everyone and welcome. This is Mary Magnuson and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on how to be effective at the Capitol. This is one in a series of monthly webinars Blandin Foundation offers for our Blandin broadband communities and open to anyone with an interest in using technology to. Before we begin, I'll point to the chat box on the lower left corner of your screen. To interact with us at any time during today's webinar, you can simply type your question or comment in the chat box. So let's get started. Again, my name is Mary Magnuson. I work here at Blandin Foundation and I administer the Blandin Community Broadband Program. Joining me today is Bill Coleman of Community Technology Advisors, who I'm sure many of you know. Bill has been Blandin Foundation's primary broadband program consultant for a number of years. I think somebody who's a speaker might have their computer not muted. So
maybe Brenda, she came on last.
Brenda? Well, we shouldn't be hearing anything through her. It might be Joe. Hang on a second.
I'm looking for the mute.
Okay. I'll just get back to it then. Thanks. Bill will introduce our guest speakers today, and they are Judy Erickson, who we've actually pre-recorded. Dorian, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask how your name is pronounced. Dorian Grilly from the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Joe Gould from Minnesota Rural Education Association, and Tom Peterson of Minnesota Farmers Union. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe, could you mute maybe your phone right now for a little bit?
I am using the website and I'm looking for my mute button. Someone could help me.
I'm going to turn your voice off for a second.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, we should be good.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Coleman, and independent consultant working on behalf of Blandin Foundation on broadband. Over the last several years, we've realized the importance of public policy in implementing rural broadband solutions. And so we've worked very hard to try and build a rural coalition around broadband as a priority at the Capitol. We've been very successful in attracting 15 to 20 different rural advocacy groups to our coalition, and we think it's being effective. Last year, we were happy to celebrate $35 million in state broadband funding for rural Minnesota, and hope to see similar results this year. One of the things as we talk to our colleagues in these other rural groups is that broadband is important to all these groups: education, healthcare, local government, economic development, chambers of commerce, and so on. But until recently, it hasn't been at the top of any of these groups' lists. And so it's been something that's been important to them, but maybe not as important as a funding formula or that's core to their mission. So but now this year we know that the Minnesota Association of Townships has actually put broadband first and second on their priority list. So we need to work on our messaging now, because we've actually seen our members of our coalition raise the importance of broadband to their group, seeing it as a fundamental question for them. Today we're lucky to be hearing from 4 different speakers on how to be effective at the Capitol, and especially with a rural perspective. We're doing something new today we haven't done before. We've pre-recorded Judy Erickson. She's a lobbyist specializing in trails and tourism, and works in places as diverse as Albert Lea and Cook County and the Cuyuna Range, and has a tremendous history of success at the Capitol. So we're going to hear from her in just a minute or two. We will also hear from Dorian Grilly, who's a good friend of mine and is executive director of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Joel Gould, who represents the Minnesota Rural Education Association, and Tom Peterson at the Farmers Union. We'll come back to those 3 after we hear from Judy. Mary, why don't you launch that recording?
I will do that. Just a minute.
All right, thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk to you today about some tips for successful engagement in the legislative process. You know, the world is run by those who show up, and that is very true in the legislative process. When you engage, you have an impact. You know, history, if you think about it, is the accumulation of individual actions, decisions, and engagement. So you may think that your participation has no meaning because there's so many things going on, but you actually do. So in thinking about engagement, there are really three pillars that you work with. You have your public policy goal, which is to expand broadband connections and network and funding. You have your public policy goal, which is that all Minnesotans should have high-speed internet and broadband, and then you have a communication plan. You need to figure out how all three of those pillars are aligned. And sometimes your politics and your policy are all aligned, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes people want to fund broadband at high levels, and some people don't. What you want is to get everyone to your goal. So you, as a coalition, have already identified your goals, and these are some of the strategies to bring your goals and your politics and your policy all in alignment. And communication is a key component to bringing politics and influencing public policy. So how do you do that? There are three kind of strategies that I recommend using to align your public policy goals and politics. One is a grassroots strategy, and that is the local support. That is individuals like you and I acting with our local legislators and our communities to advance a goal. A second strategy is a public relations strategy, and that's a little bit broader. That's using social media, news stories, TV stories, sort of engaging the broader public through a public relations strategy. And the third strategy is one that you're already utilizing, and that is a coalition strategy. Who else shares your goals? Who else wants to be successful in this area? Who else will benefit from it? And so utilizing all three of these pieces, which is basically a communication strategy, you influence your public strategies. So how do we do that? So I'm going to bring it down into how you can engage. There are several do's and don'ts that you should be aware of as you as a citizen engage in the legislative process. The first three on this list, know the legislative process, know the key players, and know your facts, should be provided to you by your coalition leadership. The rest of these, however, are on you. One of the really important things to keep in mind is to be honest. If you are not honest, you lose a lot of credibility, and your credibility and relationships is where it is all at. You also have to be willing to work hard. It is hard work influencing public policy and shifting the public view towards you. You also have to be patient. The legislative process is challenging, it's confusing, it's complex, and sometimes it takes a long time to get from here to there. There have been initiatives that I have worked on in the past where it has taken 8 to 10 years to shift public policy and politics on the same page so that we are successful. And broadband, it seems to me, is one of those issues that you guys have been working on a long time. You've have had lots of great goals, and you just have to keep working away and be patient and look for forward progress. When you are meeting with a legislator or you are testifying before a committee, be sure to get to the point. Be clear about why you're there, what you want, and what you need. And then as you also wrap up a meeting with a legislator or in testimony, and they have questions of you that you aren't able to answer, then follow through and be responsive. Above all, you want to be be effective and have a good relationship. Then when you are doing a lobby day and coming down to the Capitol, these are three, I mean, what your mom taught you, right, is still important. To be courteous, be polite, and be thankful. Those three things will get you a long way at the legislature. And then, of course, there are some basic don'ts that I have seen people do, and it doesn't go well. You are passionate about your issue, you care a lot about it, it makes a difference in your home, in your community, at your business, have high-speed internet and good broadband, but don't be overzealous. People will run away from you, and I have seen that happen. You don't want a legislator to see you and turn their back and pretend they don't see you because they don't want to talk to you because you're overzealous. If they ask you a question, don't ramble on and on and on in response. Sometimes that will take you down a rabbit trail that you won't be able to get back from. And all of a sudden, what you wanted them to remember from your conversation is completely lost in another whole side issue. And then don't correct a legislator in front of another group of legislators or in public. You know, you're smart, you know the answers, and you're in a group and you are listening to a legislator present or talk to you about your issue, and you know they're wrong. You know they're wrong, but refrain from lifting your hand and going, you know what, that's not how it works in my community. If they don't have their facts correct, then later in the day, or send them an email, or take them aside quietly and just say, you know what, in my community, that is not how it works. This is how it works. And they'll appreciate being informed because they also don't want to be stupid. And you will have saved face. And of course, don't threaten them. Don't go, okay, if you don't do this, I am going to vote against you and I'm going to tell all my friends and neighbors to vote against you. That won't get you to where you want to go either. So then let's talk about emailing, because that's also another way for grassroots engagement with your legislator. You can come down and do a lobby day, or you can sit down at your desk and send an email. And people ask, do emails work? Because legislators get hit with 300, 400, 500, 600 emails a day. And does it work? Well, yes, it still does, but there are some things to keep in mind. One is, when you send an email, only talk about one issue per email and put that issue in the subject line. And in your opening sentence, tell that legislator that you are a constituent. Why? Because if you are a constituent, they will read your email. If it's not clear to them that you are a constituent, they might pass over. So outline your issues in your email. What are your concerns? Why do you want them to support it? Suggest an action. Vote for bill number ABC in committee, and why? Why do you want them to do what they want to do? And then also just let them know that you're there as a resource for them. And again, don't threaten them. Thank them for their time. Legislators are so busy. They are so busy. So always thank them for their time and then make sure they know how to reach you. So having gone through those really quickly, I am going to narrow down to some 12 tips for active engagement. Number one, remember that legislators are human beings. Dress respectfully, be punctual, start your meeting with a compliment, be friendly again, and be polite no matter what their position is on your bill. And again, thank them for taking the time to meet with you. Introduce yourself. Number two, introduce yourself. Tell the legislator who you're representing. Don't assume that they know who you are or why you're there. If you live in their district, let them know. Number three, stick to your bill when you're meeting with them and stay on topic. Keep chit-chat to a minimum and focus on your issue. Believe me, legislators like to talk about what's going on back home, but chatting about that uses up valuable time, and all of a sudden, you're done with your meeting and you haven't even talked about why you were there. Number 4, again, never lie or make up information. Your credibility will be lost forever. If you don't know the answer to a legislator's question, then tell them you will find out and get back to them, and then do get back to them. Number 5, this is important. Treat legislative staff with respect. They are not just the gatekeepers. Their opinions often weigh heavily with a legislator. Number 6, provide a short fact sheet on your issue, but don't weigh them down with too much paper. This is especially important when a busy legislator cuts a meeting short. Leave a handout with a note, and again, your coalition leadership should be providing this information. Number 7, know your bill and tell your story. Lawmakers want to know the details of the bill and why it matters to you. So tell your story. Number 8, don't assume support. Press for explicit commitment. They'll politely nod and thank you for being there, but when you wrap up your meeting, ask your legislator to support the bill, and that means voting for the bill. And if you need to, ask them to talk to the committee chair or legislative leaders to make your bill a priority. Number 9, never criticize another legislator, lobbyist, or the opposition. It's unprofessional, it reflects poorly, creates opposition to you, and it just doesn't, the word gets around and it's just not a good thing. Number 10, again, be understanding of the complex pressures upon legislators and allow them a chance to respond to your issues. Listen carefully to their advice and don't interrupt. Number 11, don't burn bridges unnecessarily. You never know when you may have to work with a legislator in the future. And finally, number 12, send a written follow-up note thanking the legislator again and summarize any action items for the meeting. So it all gets down to knowing your issue and being polite and creating good relationships. And that's my story, my advice for you today.
Judy, thank you so much for that presentation. Very helpful and interesting, and some great tips in there for me that I can take to heart. I'm wondering about the when you're dealing with a bill where there's people who are for it and people who are against it, and you're trying to present your case and your facts, and to be sensitive to the respect to the opposition. Do you have any more advice on how you position your information in contrast with your opponents?
Yeah, you can always identify that there is opposition. Legislators are interested to know what the opposition is. My point is, don't criticize the opposition. Identifying what the opposition is and what their points of opposition are is usually helpful to a legislator. And in the same conversation, as you are sharing the opposition's point of view, give them the information, the facts that legislator needs to support you. Debunk the opposition, explain again in your community what this means and doesn't mean. It's really helpful when you're working one-on-one with a legislator and you're coming in as a grassroots coalition to bring that to your community. So explain to them why the opposition's points don't work for your community and why your points do.
Perfect. Judy, thank you so much. Judy Erickson has been a lobbyist at the Capitol for quite a number of years and very successful, especially in the trails and tourism fields. Judy, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. I think Judy gave us a good overview and a place to start. Next, we're going to call on our panelists who are able to join us today, which is great during this busy legislative session. Kind of like asking a tax accountant to take time off on a April 13th to do a webinar. So we appreciate your time today. Tom Peterson serves as Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Farmers Union, a position he's had since 2002. He's responsible for lobbying and working with farmer members in both Washington and St. Paul. He's long been involved in electoral and political issues, his first job being working for Walter Mondale's presidential campaign. So welcome today, Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about the Farmers Union?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, the Farmers Union is a general farm organization. We're not commodity specific. We represent, people that might have a 10-acre CSA near the metro area, and people that might have thousands of acres of small grains up in the valley. We work on issues, not just farm issues, but issues such as broadband, transportation, healthcare, all of those issues. We're organized by counties, so we have active chapters in 78 of the 87 counties. We have members in all 87 counties.
Great, thank you so much. Dorian Grilly is a friend of mine. He's the director of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, formerly head of the Parks and Trails Council, and prior to that, a DNR Parks and Trails planner and harbor planner on the North Shore. Dorian, tell us about the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota.
All right, sounds good. I'll go through this kind of quick. What is, I think, really interesting is I think we're in a very similar business, talking about communities thriving and surviving. The mission and vision of the Bicycle Alliance are about education and safety. We're not an anti-car organization. We're a pro-bicycle organization. And like your organization, our message is also, about communities thriving and surviving. And we say that bicycling is a simple solution to many of our country and our world's most complex problems, and that with a relatively minor investment, it could be a much bigger part of the solution. Here's a little state snapshot that I wanted to share with you. The little bicycles are bicycle-friendly communities that have been ranked by a national organization. We have 75 bike-friendly businesses, which have 71,000 employees, and those include some of the giants in Minnesota, like 3M, General Mills, and Target. 3M actually won a national competition called the National Bike Challenge. Their employees rode over 1.5 million miles in 2015, I think. And another trivial thing is Target headquarters in downtown Minneapolis has twice as many bicycle parking spaces inside as they have car parking spaces. And they have a bike shop on site staffed by a professional mechanic 3 days a week. So there are people who are really, really into this throughout Minnesota. One of the things that we have done in partnership with some of our really strong partners like the American Heart Association, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and a coalition called Minnesotans for Healthy Kids was we created the Mayoral Active Transportation Caucus. And this is basically just a group of mayors that simply say biking and walking and safe routes to school are important in our suburban community or our greater Minnesota community, and it's not just something that people do, the crazy people in South Minneapolis do. And their key message as part of our legislative action is that bicycling and walking funding should be part of any transportation funding package that happens at the legislature. That's been a challenge for us, but we keep plugging along. So much of our program work focuses on that bike-friendly and education. But I wanted to share, this is one of our messages, that young people want to live in a place that's basically safe. And this is This is a survey that shows 80% of young people want to live in a place where they don't need to depend on a car to get around. And that could be a very small town where everything is walkable or bikeable, or a bigger community that needs to have things like bike lanes and trails to get around. And the last slide I wanted to share is that in order to gain credibility throughout Minnesota and build a really strong network, much of our program work focuses on being bike friendly, the first slide that I showed you, and bike education. And we have developed a curriculum called Walk, Bike, Fun, and have a couple teachers on staff that spend their time training teachers throughout Minnesota, phy ed and health teachers, to implement the curriculum that's shown on the back of our van called Walk, Bike, Fun. So our legislative work pretty much focuses on dollars to make those things happen, make our communities be more bicycle friendly, and make bike education available to everyone. So I'll look forward to the conversation after everyone's done.
Good, thank you. Joe Gould grew up on the Iron Range in Itasca County. He was raised by a family with strong labor and public service roots. He graduated of Greenway High School, Itasca Community College, Bemidji State, now has a master's in public administration. Joe works for Capital Partners and represents the Minnesota Rural Education Association. Thanks for joining us today. I want to say that Joe's been a great member of our Rural Broadband Coalition. So thanks for joining today, Joe. Tell us about MREA.
Yes, thanks for having me, Bill. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. If not, interrupt and we'll try something else maybe through the phone here. But again, thanks, Joe Gould with the Minnesota Rural Education Association, and our firm that we contract with MREA is actually Capitol Hill Associates. We have mostly education groups and nonprofit clients, and primarily our client is the Minnesota Rural Education Association. And that is made up of most greater Minnesota school districts outside the Twin Cities metro 7-county area. We have 222 school districts as members from all across the state. If you go to our website, mreavoice.org, we have many maps, and one of those maps shows our membership, so you can get a good visual of where our members are. Our executive director, his name is Dr. Fred Nolan, retired superintendent out of Foley, does a lot of great, excellent research for our organization, which the legislative senators and representatives are very appreciative of and have publicly thanked us for in committees on more than one occasion. And so we focus on primarily the education funding formulas and work on bills to help tweak those to help more equally distribute dollars to our small rural school districts, as well as our regional center cities such as Grand Rapids and Bemidji and Wilmer, Mankato. So we like to work on primarily funding formulas, but also policies that help cut down on unfunded mandates for our school districts. And for the past 2 years, we've also been a partner in the Broadband Coalition, working to secure last year $35 million more dollars for the broadband fund. Students are going home with iPads and Chromebooks more and more every year, and we know that most homework assignments nowadays requires the internet, and so we want to make sure our students have the same opportunities as those in the metro area. Be happy to talk more and look forward to the rest of the presentation here.
Good, thank you, Joe. Let's continue with you. Can you the superintendent sets a pretty a finite set of people. Does the MREA then try and activate rural citizens? Does as a voice to the Capitol with public policy?
So our organization is made up of superintendents, teachers, school board members, and administrators. That makes up our board. So we kind of have the old rule model of get everybody that's a stakeholder in the room, and let's work together. Let's involve everybody that should be at the table. So we work to motivate mostly teachers, superintendents, and our school board community members on our issues.
Okay, very good. Dorian, now you have, it seems like a couple strategies around outreach to rural. Is it the mayor's caucus and then through the education community? Could you talk more about that and how you actually engage in that outreach and the benefits of that you see? Dorian? Well, we'll come back to Dorian. Tom, tell us a little bit more about how you activate your members around rural public policy issues.
Yeah, so we do quite a few different ways. The sites everybody knows, newsletters and emails. This week, for example, though, we did have our lobby day at the Capitol. It was very effective. You know, we brought in over 100 farmers from across the state, and not just with legislators, but also key administration staff. And I think that's one thing that people overlook in the legislative process is you got to have the governor's going to sign the bill, so you need to work with the appropriate state agencies and make sure you're on that track as well. So the lobby day at the Capitol is very effective. And then I also do more targeted days where I bring in key members, key farmers to help me lobby at the Capitol. We also, as Judy said, we use social media more and more. That's a challenge when you have a group like farmers where they're spread across the whole state. And so social media helps keep us in connection with our farmers. We also utilize conference calls that are issue specific for our farmers. So we might have one conference call for dairy farmers, one for grain farmers, one for farmers that are doing local food production. That helps us connect with people that are issue specific and helps us get some of our ideas out there. So many different ways to communicate and keep updated.
Okay. To follow up on that, you know, in broadband, not everyone is always on the same page about what the priorities are and what policies are going to be best. How do you mediate between all your ag interests?
Well, it's very difficult at times. We have a policy that we follow that is adopted by our members. We have 70-some county meetings in the fall where our policies are adopted and then voted on at our state convention. And so we try to follow our policy guide as closely as we can. If not, then we do revert back to visiting with our county leaders and trying to use our grassroots as much as we can. We try not to make decisions from the top down, but rather from the bottom up. And so it is difficult sometimes, and there are times when we need to compromise as well.
Very good. Dorian, I think you're back online. My question for you is that seems that you have a two-pronged rural strategy around the mayor's caucuses and then the school bike safety programs. Can you talk more about how, you know, especially this mayor's caucus, I think is especially relevant to our issue. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that the Bicycle Alliance, which is only 8 years old, did right at the beginning was find some well-established organizations that shared our vision to partner with. And one of those was the American Heart Association, another Blue Cross Blue Shield, and between them, a coalition called Minnesotans for Healthy Kids. And they lended a lot of credibility to us, and we partnered with them to actually form the mayoral caucus. And as I said before, the simple message is that bicycling and walking is important to our quality of life. It's important to attracting young people and families, and it's obviously very important to the public health in our communities. But the Bicycle Alliance is a traditional nonprofit organization with individual members. We have chapters in 6 places around the state. And like Tom, we use social media. There was a bill introduced a couple weeks ago. We posted it within a couple hours on our Facebook page, and within a day and a half it had 30,000 views. So social media is a really important tool. But we have assembled a subset of those teachers and the mayors and our members and chapter leaders that we call an action team, and we send out action alerts to them. And we do bi-monthly calls with those advocates. And those advocates are the people with personal relationships with their community leaders, elected officials, public officials, and obviously people in the legislature. So that's been our strategy is, I like to say partner with those bigger and more powerful than you. So that's been our strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. The one of the things that we, and I think that's an interesting thing on this, how do you motivate the coalition to action? You know, that's one of my questions. And heard from Tom about the Capitol on the Day, you know, the Farmers on the Hill kind of thing. Tom, what do you find are the secrets to success for those days on the Hill?
Yeah, you know, I always say I don't, I tell a lot of people this. It's probably one of the hardest things I do as a lobbyist all year, you know, that it takes a lot of work to put it together. And it keeps me up at night, and it is a hard thing to put together, but the results are always really helpful. And what I do is that I find is helpful is we do get the meetings, as many meetings as we can with legislators, and we do try to prepare our members for what it's going to be like. That, you know, don't be afraid if you only get a 5-minute meeting or a 1-minute meeting in the hallway. Just the fact that they run into you is really helpful. Having, you know, we use bigger stickers or buttons. When I first started with Farmers Union, we had these stickers or buttons that we wore. You really couldn't tell it even said Farmers Union. The next year, I got much bigger ones where it was really clear that we were the Farmers Union. And instead of having 100 and some people that day, it snowed, and I only had 20 people come. But because we had the bigger name and what it said, people were surprised and said, "Oh, I saw so many of your people around the Capitol." And in reality, I said, "Geez, you know," I'm thinking to myself, I only had 25 people, but they saw them everywhere, and they saw the stickers. And so, you know, when you have 100 and some, it really magnifies. So my point is that, you know, having some kind of, you know, gimmick or whatever your thing is on your lobby day really does help push all over. And it also opens up the door for members to have conversations in the hallway, in the elevator, at the lunchtime. And I always think that's interesting where members report back to me. They'll say, "You know, I met this guy while I was having lunch," or "I met this legislator in the hallway and they approached me." And so, you know, I think that's really important. But we also, like I said, we meet with the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the administration. I think that's really important. We also meet with the attorney general, who's right in the Capitol, and works on a lot of our issues from a legal standpoint. And so that is, we also try to hit some metro legislators as well as rural legislators. Sometimes it's also very important for some of our members. So we look for the metro legislators that have some kind of rural connection.
Well, that's interesting that the idea of creating a buzz about that it's your day is just as important maybe as the meetings that take place. That the perception that there's a
Exactly.
big
No, I
crowd.
think it does. Because it does show strength and it shows interest. It shows that you have a vibrant organization. And I think that is really important. It shows that you're able to bring a lot of folks to the Capitol and that they care enough about your organization and your issues to make it down. And I think, I notice as a lobbyist the different days when they're, Bemidji, for example, is one that always sticks out to me. Joe would know this. He's from up in that area. They wear these vests, and that are kind of like the lumberjack vests. And those are really things like that. They do help spread your message and get the word out that you're there that day.
Good, thank you.
Bill, I can share another story.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Can I share another story?
Yes.
The first year we did a day on the Hill, we had little plastic, bright colored bicycle pins, and we gave everybody in our group one. And they found out that everywhere they went in the Capitol, somebody wanted one. So the next year we gave everybody 10 of them. And the cashier in the Capitol Cafe was wearing one. They gave them to legislators. Legislators wanted one for each one of their children. And yes, Tom and Joe, I have seen, I know the people from Bemidji. They send a big contingent to our Day on the Hill too, but I love it when they wear their plaid vests. So that is really important to get people engaged. The other thing that I think is important is to have, it's really wonderful, Tom, that you're able to get the governor to speak at yours. We're not quite there yet. But having some key legislators, we used to get Mr. Oberstar, Congressman Oberstar, to come for our first couple of years. He was always a big draw to get people to come to the event. So, but yeah, when you have the governor speak, that's kind of the ultimate for a day on the Hill.
Good, good. Joe, what's your feedback on Days on the Hill? I know you're active in our effort.
Yeah, no, I think Dorian and Tom made some really key points. Visibility, visuals are very important. Love the Bemidji crew when they come down with their plaid flannel vests and big bright buttons is a great way to stand out and create some buzz. Very important to stand out like that. But another way to also have your presence known at the Capitol, and it's kind of a tactic we do with MREA in partnership with the Superintendents Association, is to have a sustained presence throughout the legislative session. We're supportive of Broadband Day on the Hill and other days on the Hill, but another alternative way is we bring our superintendents down. We split them up by region. Region 1 will come down 1 week, Region 2 will come down 2 weeks later, so on and so forth throughout the legislative session, and so we'll kind of stagger our folks throughout session to meet with key legislators. So another way to do it is like that. And I would like to mention that we also do social media. We have a pretty active Facebook and Twitter page. We also send out weekly newsletters, e-blasts, and we'll do action alerts throughout the session when key pieces of legislation get a committee hearing, for instance. So, yeah, we also like to partner with other organizations. The farm groups, for example. We partner with Tom in the Farmers Union and also Corey Bennett and the soybean group and the corn growers for our Egg to School initiative, for example. So it's good to build coalitions and have broad bipartisan support. And we might get into this a little bit later, but maybe now is an appropriate time. It's important to have bipartisan authors on your bills, and especially Your chief authors should be the party in power. So, for example, this year the House and Senate are controlled by Republicans. It's important to try and find a Republican chief author to ensure a bill hearing.
Good. Joe, why don't you follow up on that with a little more about, bird dogging bills, and how does the group stay up on what's happening at the Capitol? Obviously, having somebody like your firm or Judy's firm or full-time person working that, but what are the best 2 or 3 ways to keep up on what's going on?
Sure. Just being here every day, attending committee hearings. That's half the day for a lot of us. It's like going to class in school. It's a good way to track bills is to keep tabs on upcoming committee hearings. You can subscribe to the different committees' listservs, and so then you'll have a heads up about which bills are going to be coming up over the next week, and then going to those committees and tracking the conversations that members have during the bill hearings. And maybe you'll pick up some intel during the committee hearing based on what a member or a senator says, and that might be an opportunity to schedule a meeting with them based on what you heard in committee. So just being present, being here every day, being a good listener, and going to committee.
Okay, good. Tom, what's your strategy? Tom?
I think what Joe just said about being there every day when you're a association or advocate is really important. You really do pick up things legislators see you, they're able to talk to you and connect. So that's one way that I try to keep up. Also, I follow the introductions every day. I read through every introduction that comes through and look, and I ask questions of legislators about why they introduced the bill or if they can be helpful on that certain bill. And I think trying to just communicate with legislators as much as possible.
Okay, thanks.
Bill, I can share a couple ideas too.
Thanks.
I think it's just essential to have a professional lobbyist at the Capitol. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. I'm not a professional lobbyist. So we do have someone there every day, and they call me. But what I view my job as is, and I used to work with Judy, is acquiring the stick, acquiring the clout that lobbyist has. And that comes from those personal relationships and trust that's built either by, the staff of an organization, the members of an organization, the superintendents, or the farmers. And I think that is really, really important. They need to know the legislators need to know that you're representing someone that they trust deeply. And that can come from things like in-district meetings with legislators. I make an effort to go out and meet with our chapter organizations and members and sit down with a legislator for coffee on Saturday morning or breakfast on Saturday morning. So again, I can become that messenger, that trusted messenger that represents our members and community leaders like the mayors when I go to the Capitol or when I have our lobbyist working on something at the Capitol.
Okay, it's interesting, with broadband, there's not really a formal nonprofit or advocacy group, called the Minnesota Broadband Team or Association, and the telecom providers certainly have their sets of lobbyists. but looking at a more community-based point of view. And so without creating a kind of formal organization, any ideas or recommendations for how a coalition of groups that have this shared interest can work effectively together? Are there comparable organizations or situations you guys see at the Capitol where these kind of ad hoc groups that have some champions but not necessarily a formal structure or much money?
Well, one of the ones that pops into my head is the group that I mentioned before, is the Minnesotans for Healthy Kids. But they do get grant money from a national campaign organized by the Heart Association, and they use that money to hire a professional lobbyist. So perhaps if you could get everybody to throw a little bit of money in the pot, and come up with $10,000 to $20,000, perhaps you could hire a professional lobbyist, and I think that'd be a great investment. I mean, you're doing really, really well with $35 million to begin with, but like Joe and Tom have said, there's no substitute for someone being there every day. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Dorian. Tom?
Well, I'd also say that we're in quite a few of what I would call ad hoc groups. So we have one on the Governor's Buffer initiative. Joe mentioned we have a farm to school. I have probably 10 coalitions that we're in around the Capitol of some form. Some are very formal, some we maybe chip in a few bucks, some we meet every week, some as needed, and but they are very helpful to get groups together. I'm a big believer in coalitions. The legislators will tell us one thing a lot of times. They'll say, why don't you guys, and lobbyists go into their office, they'll say, why don't you guys get all your stuff together and then come to me with what you want to do? Because legislators get tired too of 10 different people coming in and telling them the same thing or telling them different things, and that it's helpful for them if we can work it out and come to some kind of agreement. And so coalitions are helpful, and then for coalition just working to pass something, there's strength in numbers. And so I'm a believer in coalitions, as frustrating as it is for somebody who goes to a lot of different meetings sometimes, but it does work.
Good, thank you, Tom. Tom, we need to get the Farmers Union in on our broadband coalition. Seems like there's a lot of overlap.
No, we should do that. And that it's not just Farmers Union, but Farm Bureau or the corn growers or soybean growers. I think with farm equipment changing daily and farm technology changing daily, having access to broadband is almost essential now for a modern farm operation. And many of our farmers too that direct market their products, that's a very growing business. When we met with the Lieutenant Governor and Governor this week, that was one of the topics that came up, that people they don't have the speeds that they need to run their farm. And so those issues are hard too in the rural areas where you're at the end of the line, and trying to figure out the costs and everything. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with you after the fact today, but it's clear we're missing that voices that we need to have. So, and we know the farm is the biggest tech center in most rural places. Every farm is got a whole set of applications that are very advanced and big business. So it's good to have. Joe, the MREA has been such a great part of our rural coalition, and I think with we've had a lot of success, mainly due to townships have really banded together to help people stay informed on broadband. I've talked about having buttons that say "and broadband too," because it's important. You know, everyone's got their own important thing plus broadband, and I think that's the way our coalition has gone as well. That we really appreciate your help on that. Any additional thoughts on how our group could be more effective?
Well, I think I would agree with Dorian and Tom's comments just now. So I don't have too much to add, but I do know that Deer Hunters Day at the Capitol is also March 15th this year. So if we do order some buttons, maybe we should avoid the blaze orange and go with a yellow or a lime green, perhaps.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Or we need to have the deer hunters talk about the need for broadband out there too. So we need to get
Absolutely.
in their coalition.
Yeah.
I don't see any
Bill,
questions.
I wanted to note that I just wanted a quick note that I did look at your website, and there are some great stories and some great quotes on the website, and I just think those stories need to be told over and over and over again. That, I think, will go a long way.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Dorian. I want to thank everyone for, let's see. Well, it looks like we're going to have some customized blue handkerchiefs to wear during the Broadband Day. So designed by Bernadine. So that will be great. Thank you, Bernadine. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As you know, these webinars are archived, and we tend to see usually about 20 people online during the day, but then within a couple weeks, a couple hundred people actually view this and watch, and so that's we feel it's really helping to get our message out and using a little bit of the technology that we promote. So those are two good things. I want to thank Judy and Absentia today, but Dorian, Joe, and Tom for some great information, and I'll turn it over to Mary.
And I too would like to thank all of our presenters today. Really appreciate you joining us today. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 9th, 2017, and the topic is Legislative Update. Thanks everyone for attending today's webinar, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.